Hello magical hands and welcome to Sew with Jessica. In today's tutorial we are going to be learning how to make this lovely kaftan dress right here on the screen. So if you look at this dress properly, you will see that it has a cut together sleeve and it also has side pockets, and in this tutorial I'm going to be learning how to make all of that. Also, this was the inspiration of the dress, this was the inspiration behind the dress, and I just did a few changes to mine. So if it's something you're interested in learning, make sure to keep on watching, and let's get into the video of today proper. For my fabric, I have this beautiful Ankara print here, and I have 2.5 yards, and you can use any other Ankara fabric of your choice. Also, this particular fabric that I have here has no difference between the good and the wrong face, so I just use that right up at the base there to know which part is the wrong face, and then I just go ahead to mark it out to indicate that that is the wrong face. So I'm going to fold this fabric up in such a way that the wrong face is facing up, so I know that all my chalked lines are on the wrong face. So this area here is the place where the yards are measured. I'm going to fold it up just as seen, and after folding it up I'm going to try to fold it again so that the fabric will be folded in 4. So now that my fabric is folded into 4, I will be able to cut both the front and the back piece at once. So right here, this is the wrong face, using that right up there. So it means all my chalked lines will be visible on the wrong face. And if I didn't mention earlier, the length of this fabric is 45 inches. It's not up to 60 inches. And that is why I folded it like this. So what I did here was to open up that side of the fabric because that side was on fold. So at that side there where I am cutting the fabric out, I have my fabric in 4 separate pieces, but on this other side I have everything on fold, and that is how it's supposed to be. First thing we are going to do is to mark the starting line. So I marked 1 inch downwards from the right top of the fabric there, and I'm going to rule out a straight line there. So this 1 inch that I'm marking is like the allowance. Just in case you are cutting this out, you are going to add up your sewing allowance from whatever space you have up there, since we are not using a pattern paper. I placed my tape from the starting line and I marked the full length of this dress, of which I am using 35 inches, and that's because I'm going to be adding a black band to the length. So 35, 36 thereabouts will be fine. So I just ruled out a straight line there. I'll place back the tape on the starting line and I'm going to mark from my shoulder to my bust point, which is right there, and I'm using 12 inches for mine, so I'll just rule out a straight line across that point. We'll place the tape on the starting line, and this time around we are going to take our shoulder to the waistline. I'm using 18.5 inches for mine, and I'll rule out a straight line at that point. I'll place back the tape on the starting line and I'll mark from my shoulder to my hip line, which I'm using 25.5, and I'll rule out a straight line at that point. You can also use my measurements for yours because you can see this is a free size. I am a size 10, just in case you have the same size. So now that I've mapped out the basic lines, the basic points, I'll move on to the starting line. I'll mark my neck width, that is how wide I want the neckline to be, and I'm using 4 inches. So I marked 4 inches there, and then for the neck depth I am going to mark 1.5 inches. That is going to be the neck depth. This measurement I am taking is the neckline of the back piece. Okay, we are still going to work on the neckline of the front piece later on. So I'll connect these 2 points together with a curve, which should look exactly like this. Now I'm going to mark what the front neckline should look like. So I place my tape from that starting line. Mind you, the starting line, not the neckline of the back piece. From that starting line, I'm going to determine how deep I want the neckline to be. So I marked 8 inches for the depth of the neckline. You can use 8, 9, 10. And then for the width, I'm going to make sure it is 1 inches wide. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that that dash that I'm drawing there is 1 inch wide, and then I'm going to connect a straight line or a slanted line. It's going to be like a V neckline, but there's going to be space at the center of it. I'll connect it to meet the 4 inches that I have at the starting line there. That is what the front neckline will look like. So we have the back neckline, we have the front neckline. So I'll place my tape back there and I'll take my shoulder measurement, divide by 2, which gives me 7.5, but I just use 8 inches. And I'm not going to be taking my armhole because, as we already know, this it has like a cut together sleeve. So from that shoulder width there, I'm now going to mark the length of my sleeve, how long I want my sleeve to be. And then I'm using 8 inches for the length of the sleeve, which is not a long sleeve. So from where I have the length of my sleeve there, I'm going to now determine the width of the sleeve, the opening of the sleeve, how opened I want the sleeve to be. So I marked 10 inches downwards, and then I also decided to show you guys another way to get this. You can just decide to mark 2 inches upwards from your bust point. That is like a perfect sleeve opening measurement, 2 inches upwards from your bust point, which is also the same thing as the 10 inches that I marked downwards. So I'll just rule out that line there. That is where the opening of my sleeve is going to be. I hope you understand. If you don't, just keep on following the video and you understand. On the bust point line, you're going to take your round bust measurement, divide it by 4 and mark what it gives you. Make sure you're marking your exact bust measurement, after which you're going to mark 2 inches for ease. That is going to be how free the dress will be, and then 1 inch for your sewing allowance. Okay, 2 inches for ease, 1 inch for sewing allowance. On the waistline, you're going to take your round waist measurement, divide by 4. You're going to mark 2 inches for ease, and we're going to mark 1 inch for sewing allowance. Mind you, we did not take the under bust measurement. Now moving on to the hip line, you're going to take your round hip measurement, divide it by 4 and mark what it gives you. You're going to add 2 inches for ease and then 1 inch for sewing allowance. And we are going to duplicate this hip measurement we have here to the full length, which includes the sewing allowance and the ease allowance. Now we are going to connect all these our measurements together. And then we are going to create a nice curve to meet the armhole opening that we have right here. And this is what your main dress should look like basically. Now we are going to mark out the pocket, and for the length of the pocket, I marked 18 inches downwards from my starting line. I marked 18 inches, which is right there. And then for the width of the pocket, you are going to place your hand the same way you would place your hand in your pocket. You're going to place your hand outside of these measurements that we've already taken, and you're going to tilt your hand downwards. Okay, this is like a free method, and what I'm going to do is to trace out a pocket that is enough to accommodate my 5 fingers. So I'll just connect it like this. The width of the pocket, that is how wide the pocket opening will be, depends on how you place your hands. And the shape of your pocket should look like this. Okay, it should be tilted downwards. It should not be straight forward. It should not be very straight. It should be tilted downwards and enough to accommodate your 5 fingers. This way, if it's tilted downwards, it's going to relax properly. So this is basically everything, guys. We can go ahead and start cutting everything out. While you're cutting the top parts, make sure to leave at least half an inch for the sewing allowance of the top parts. So for the neckline, we are going to first of all cut out the back neckline. And after cutting it out, we are going to remove one of them. We are just going to remove that inside piece. And we'll just focus on this particular piece that has like chalks on it. So now we are going to cut out the front neckline. So that one I kept outside is going to be my back piece, and this is my front piece. That is the difference between the front piece and the back piece, which is the neckline. So I'll just go ahead and continue to start out the wrong face so I am not confused any further. So the first thing I want to do is to start working on the shoulder area. This is the right face of my fabric, and I'm going to place them on each other, right face facing each other, and I'm going to sew along the shoulder areas. So I have sewn the shoulder areas together, I have joined them together, and this particular method I want to do next is totally optional. You can decide to skip this particular method, but it helped me make sure all my pieces were in place. It just helped me have control of everything. So I just went ahead from that armhole area and I sewed to that pocket area there, and then I continued sewing all around the pockets, and I then came down and I continued sewing my 1 inch sewing allowance for the body sewing allowance. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to do it on the other side as well. But note that as you are sewing this, you are going to use a loose stitch, something that you can lose at any time. Do not sew it very tight. And let's not forget that the allowance I have around this my areas here is like 1 inch. So you're just going to mark it. I'm just going to use my chalk to show you what the sewing allowance looks like. Okay, my side seam allowance that I used was 1 inch, but if you notice when I was cutting out the pocket, I only used half an inch, so I'm just going to mark only half an inch around the pocket as well. And once I have finished chalking out this my allowance, it's exactly on these chalked lines that I have here that I'm going to sew this allowance. You might want to skip this method, and probably after you're done prepping your neckline, adding all the bands, you can sew it up like this. But this way it enabled me had like better control, and also made me to understand what I was sewing properly. And like I said, you just use like a loose stitch, which is totally optional stitch. So let's just go ahead, sew along this chalked area. So after sewing up the side seams, I'm going to flip everything to the right face so you guys can see something clearly. So after I flipped it to the right face, you will see that the side seams was not relaxing properly, and that's because of the pockets that was there. So what we are going to do is to notch the starting area and the finishing area of the pockets. That way your dress is going to relax properly, and also when you put in your hands in your pockets, it will relax well. So at that point there, we are going to notch, and then at this point here we are going to notch. You can also go ahead and reduce your sewing allowance at this point to half an inch if you want, which is totally optional, but I'm going to notch all around the pocket because it's important to notch along curved areas. And now that I've prepped the inside seams properly, by the time I flip this over to the right face, you will see that the pocket is going to relax properly. So before I move on with anything, I'm going to iron this down. Like I said, we are still going to lose this side seam, but this way I've been able to bring out the shape that I have in mind. And by the time I want to totally sew, everything is going to be easy because I've already concealed it with my iron. And so I cut out a band that is 2 inches wide on fold, and I used a crepe fabric for that band that I have right here. So that is going to go over to the neckline, and you barely can tell the difference between the front and the back neckline of this dress, and that's because of the type of fabric that I have here. So I folded the band into 2, and I just marked out the midpoint, and I'm going to place the midpoint of that on the back neckline just as seen. I'll just use my pin to secure that point there. Once I've secured the band at the midpoint of the neckline, I can go ahead and pin this band all through the whole neckline. Remember, we've already joined the shoulder area. We can just go ahead and pin it all through the whole neckline so we can sew it together. And make sure you're sewing up the sewing allowance that was added. So this band is on fold, and the band is 2.5 inches wide. So this is what it looks like after I've joined the band to the neck area, and this is, I just tried as much as possible to show you a closer view of what it looks like. So the remaining band there, you might want to put it inside. Let's say you don't want to do that whole design, and also don't forget to trim the allowance that is left on the neckline. The allowance was quite big, so I trimmed it off later on. So you can decide to just fix it inside that space there, and then top stitch along that area to seal it if this is the type of neckline you want, and that will be it. But I am not doing that. I'm still going to put like another whole design at that area there. I just hope you understand with this video that I'm doing here, and like this whole close view, this is the closest I can zoom this, but this is the whole idea. But since we are not doing that, we are going to bring the band outside. Okay, we are not going to push it inside in that space that we have there. No, we are going to bring it outside, and that's because we are sewing something else on it. So I already cut out the design I want to use, and I'm going to place it like this. I'm going to try to place it in the center, just exactly where this band is. That is my center, and I'll place it on it, and I'm going to top stitch the design on that area there. And like I said before, I'm using a crepe fabric for my design, and also the neckband and all the places where I put the band. It's a crepe fabric. So what I did was to cut out another piece for it so that I can turn it. So after sewing it all around, I'm just going to create a little opening in one of the face. Okay, I'll just notch along the curved area, and I'll open a little opening. You can also create any type of shape that you want, and I didn't really use a measurement for this particular shape that I cut out here. I just cut out something straight, and then I curved one side, and that was how I got this. You can decide to create any shape at all that you want. So now that I've created this little opening here, that circle there, I'm going to use it to flip everything over to the right face. I'm going to pull the fabric out to the right face, and that part that is torn is the part that will be facing the main fabric itself. So I already ironed it and I'm going to place it at the midpoint. I've already showed you guys how to place it, but make sure that that part that you turned is facing the main fabric itself. And you will use your pin to secure all the four corners of this band. You use your pin to secure it to the fabric itself. In order to be able to sew this properly, we are going to have to lose the side seam. And like I mentioned earlier, make sure to use a loose stitch when you were sewing it that first time. So after losing the side seam, we'll go ahead and sew up the band to the dress itself, okay? And just as I indicated, that's how you're going to sew it up. Let me just open everything up so you can have a better view of what it is. So after sewing the band up, this is what it should look like. And then next we are going to start attaching the band to the sleeve area and to the full length. And for my band, I just made sure everything was 2 inches wide. 2 inches was just like the perfect measurement. I'll place my folded band on that side of the sleeve area, and then I'm going to pin everything down. Just note that anything I'm doing to this side of the sleeve is also what I'll be doing to the other side of the sleeve. By the time I finish fixing this, I'm going to now shape the dress. I'm going to like sew the side seams again, but this time around sewing the side seam will be easy. You just need to just sew and then just serge or weave your dress, because we've already defined the sewing lines. So after that was ready, after I've attached the band to it, I also went ahead to attach that band to the base as well. That is the full length area. And then at this point, we are going to shape the dress like I mentioned earlier. So you can already see that our first sewing lines is still very visible, and that's because after we finished sewing, we ironed it. So what we are going to do is to sew on that sewing line again. Let's say you did not sew the first time I was sewing on the sewing line. Now it's time for you to actually take them side seams measurement, so and then notch along the pocket area so that it will relax properly by the time you fit in your hands. So after sewing it up, you are going to weave or serge and you are going to iron this properly. This is basically everything for this tutorial, guys. If you watched this point and you've not subscribed, please do well to hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, because that will help you to recommend this channel to other people as well. And that being said, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.